Hi guys, I'm Becca Otis from Five Lines Pottery, and I'm located in Van.
And I'm Ryan Durbin from RD Ceramics, located in Highland Heights, Kentucky.
And welcome to Wheel Talk.
Alrighty, we are live.
We're
Um,
live.
yeah, Becca's here. We also have a third guest with us that I've only met you a couple times at the conferences. I mean, I don't know. Becca's actually seen you in person at your location, but yeah, I would say you're like pretty fresh with like myself and what you do and all that stuff. But I feel like Becca's known you for quite a bit, but you know,
We go way back.
you go
Oh yeah,
way back.
Way
way
back
back to
when I first did.
2023.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'm fresh in the community and just trying to get plugged in and make connections.
Well,
Yeah.
what's your name?
Yeah. How do you
My
want to introduce yourself? How do you introduce yourself to folks?
Sure. I am Jordan Kloppe with Bluebird Clay in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Nice. Have
We
you
make
been there for a while? What's is Bluebird Clay a brand new name? Or are people familiar with it, or is it kind of a something that other folks have would be familiar with?
Sure. I think the name Bluebird and with clay has been around since 70 or is it 69, 1969. It's been Bluebird Manufacturing. And with the acquisition, just to make a clear deviation from the old and the new, we went with Bluebird Clay, just to make it clear and maybe a little bit better branded, so we know that we are the clay involved in the clay world.
Okay. So what is your personal background?
Oh, oh, I guess a little bit of everything, right? That's how we get to where we're at. But background is grew up with parents in the collision repair business, and it was always going to the shop with dad and watching everybody build and fix things, and I think that's kind of where my love for creating and building things with my hands started. And then from there, just growing up over time, I got into machining, and so that led me to take a bunch of engineering classes and figure out just the how and why of so many things and kind of understand um, basic concepts and all that. I don't have a degree or anything, but I guess we get along pretty well
Yeah.
in building stuff.
So did you all in the shop back in the day, like when you're growing up, was it a lot of welding and like what goes on in that kind of it? I would guess there's some like heavy machinery kind of work as well as some like fine detail sort of work
It
along the
was
way.
it's a body shop, so it's fender benders, it's crashing and crashes, and so little fender benders, it wasn't very interesting. It was take a fender off, paint it, put a fender back on, and then the the big crashes where they went on the frame machine and they had to like rip the entire interior out of the car, and you're pulling on it with hydraulics and chains, and that was always fun. We had a guy that worked for us for years and years, and he was fun and he was a really good teacher. So, and then that was like, you got to be a mechanic. You have to understand that there is no playbook, there's no way to do it, and it's not just step one do this, step two do this. It's kind of a fluid situation, and it really taught me a lot about problem solving and just fixing things, because every crash is different. The angle of the impact and all that affects the chassis of the car, and that's why it's so fluid. So yeah, we would go there and we would pull cars in and out, and I had my fair share of backing into the customers' cars with another customer's car on accident, and
Oh.
I don't know how my dad didn't ever kill me, but
And I
it's
would suspect a lot of it's not like just looking at this part and you're like, okay, this is damaged, so we're gonna take this part off. We're gonna get it in this catalog of what part this is from this specific model, order that part, replace it. It's kind of a problem solving of what needs to be replaced, what can be manipulated back into working order and be tested that it still works as expected versus, starting from scratch essentially with some parts.
Yep, absolutely. And it was there the communication, because the technicians, they wouldn't order parts. They would just make a list of what parts, and they would work with my dad to figure out what parts, and where he would source those and all that. But yeah, it was always fun to see that lack of communication or poor communication between him and the guys. So it was always fun to just roll your eyes and say, I'm going to do it better than this. So that I
Yeah.
think that as well.
So is this like into your teenage years and that kind of thing before you went to, it sounded like, I think you mentioned, was it specifically a trade school or something like that where you got a little bit of some
Yeah, well,
education outside of that?
well, I no, not yeah, it was like a little after high school, and that was just like evenings. I was working, I was an arborist at the time, so I was climbing trees and pruning trees at the time. And then from there, I was going to buy that business. Um, but it didn't work out. A big corporation came in and bought it. So that was kind of like the first business that I wanted to buy. Um, and that didn't work out. So from there, I got into excavation, and I saw a lot of that was a whole new world to me. So I learned about digging basements and sewer and water laterals, putting water lines in, the initial sewer line hookup and that whole world. So I did that for a while, and it was fine. I worked for a couple small companies, and that was good. I didn't like it because I was like, I'm doing everything myself and making a small percentage of it. So from there, I went to work for my brother, and his business is home automation, um, audio and video distribution, and lighting control and all that. So I worked for him for a couple
Mm.
of years. That was just BB stacking for me. So from there, I started buying equipment. Actually, no, that's not the true case. From there, my brother, one of his clients, uh, billionaire, I said, I said, I want to build they were talking about a toy hauler, and I was like, I'll build you a toy hauler.
A
And
toy hauler? What is that? A
toy
kid's
hauler is
Trailer.
like, it's like a trailer that you can put four-wheelers and ATVs in, but it's like a RV as well. So it's got the full amenities.
Okay. It's not just buying a trailer that is the dimensions that can hold it. It's like built for those specific vehicles and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was the Jordan style. So I made a drawing, and this is like a semi trailer. I mean, this is like, I mean, the budget was like a little over $1 million trailer. So uh,
Holy. Oh, sorry. Oh my God. Okay, so anyway, I apologize to Jordan's mom because I already messed it up. I
that's what
already messed it up.
Beep!
I've
Holy
beep.
beep!
Anyway, we're trying not to cuss in this episode so Jordan's kids can listen to it. So,
oh, my grandma.
and
You
your grandma.
you failed, Becca. All right.
I
Clean slate.
promise
Clean
Yeah,
slate. All right,
that'll be the last one.
you've got $1 million budget to build this trailer and it's Jordan style.
it's
Continue.
Jordan style. So we started this project, and we had a hard deadline for hunting season that year. So we were doing it in an airplane hangar, was the project, was the location for the build. And I had dozens of contractors and all these people working on it, and it ended up amazing. I mean, it's like marble bathroom and all walnut cabinets, and it was absolutely beautiful. And after we finished that project, he offered me a job. So he offered me a job, and my brother saw it as like he was stealing from me or from him. It was like his brother, and now his brother's not going to work for him anymore. So that
Mhm.
was a dream job, and that was an amazing opportunity. And I worked for him for a couple years, and during that time, I started accumulating tools of my own, just as a hobby. And then finally, I broke off from there after I had that that shop was running. And I started the cut shop, which is my machine shop job shop. And that's kind of how we got into the metal manufacturing and machining part of the whole deal.
Okay. So did
Wild.
you did that kind of honest I keep hearing you talk about like starting your own and working for other people and like did that entrepreneurial kind of was that in the back of your mind? Is that from growing up and that kind of thing, or did you always have this intuition for wanting to do that yourself?
Yeah, it's a family thing. My 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 grandma, they had a mobile home business in Kansas, and then they owned dealerships and that sort of thing. So, and then my parents had the body shop, and my brother's got his gig. So it's just, I think it's what we know, it's what we do. It just is a comfortable place for us to be, and I think the challenges and the freedoms that come with it is just part of the game, and that's where it felt right to me. So um, yeah, I think it's just natural. That's kind of um, I guess without even saying or doing it, that was or just without saying it, that was always the plan, I guess.
Okay. So, because I would suspect in those types of businesses, you're relying on fewer clients, some bigger like they're longer term projects. They're not just short few day projects. It sounds like they're bigger undertakings. So it's, higher dollar, fewer projects for a year, and maybe there's bigger machinery and material costs and all of that built into that also.
For me, or for what I was used to.
Just historically with the kind of machine shop and those big like working for your brother or that big trailer project, like it sounds like they're fairly heavy cost undertakings.
Yep, and sometimes the big projects, working for my brother, the big long wiring projects, it was just like hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think when I started my shop, I would take the little jobs where it's just like, 4 or 5 hours of labor. It's a quick in, quick out, get paid. It's good cash flow. So I looked forward to the smaller, shorter jobs because it was just a quick cash flow and not like this huge undertaking. I had restored some other camper trailers, and you get to the point where you're just like so sick of it, you just want to get it out of there. So
Hmm.
um, it's kind of it's a mixture, I guess. You kind of get sick of one thing, so you hustle other types of jobs, and with small business, it's you can have that flexibility and that freedom to kind of chase what you want, and I guess find that niche where you can plug in and just put it on, cruise control.
So what was kind of leading you up to kind of where you're at now with Bluebird? What were you kind of doing and thinking about maybe, the buying of Bluebird or Soldner or kind of like what was right before that happened and
Sure, it was I wasn't thinking about Bluebird. It was never on my mind. I didn't even know. I'd never been in. Of course, I've seen ceramics and I've seen pottery wheels and all that, but I was never plugged into that world. And I was driving to my shop, which is right next to Bluebird. My dad had always painted that awful orange buckets that Bluebirds always use. My dad painted them because we were right next door to Bluebird. So I had seen, but I never knew what they did. And I was driving to my shop one day, and the employee over there was unloading a truck by hand. And I just felt so bad for him. I jumped in my forklift and drove over there. I was like, "Hey, you want me to help you unload this stuff?" And he says, "Yeah, that'd be great." And I could tell he was down. I go, "What's wrong?" He's like, "Oh, my boss is closing up and shutting down." And just jokingly, I said, "Well, what's he selling?" He's like, "Well, he's trying to sell the business in the building." And I said, "Well, shoot, I'll buy it. It's right next to this my folks' building, and sure, I'll buy it." He's like, okay, he got all excited. And that, I drove away in the forklift and went back to work, and I really didn't think much of it, but I was like, that would be really nice to get that building. And
It's like uh, I think you should describe what the building looks like, Jordan.
well, it is the ugliest building within like a 5 mile radius. And we
How
get a
big is
lot.
this building? I suspect it's a large I mean, it's manufacturing, so I would
No,
guess it's not small, but
No,
no,
I mean,
it's pretty small.
yeah, it's only it's 50 by 75. So it's not a great big enormous warehouse space, and space in Fort Collins, that I mean, just the taxes on a great big industrial space like that is so crazy. So it's really not a inexpensive place to build things. So um yeah, it's it's just an ugly building. It's got this Spanish tile uh eave put on it that's falling apart, and it's paint's peeling and all this stuff. So, but the inside is beautiful, and it's our shop, and we love it. So that's kind of our space.
so before buying it, what was Bluebird generally known for? If people don't know their products before and Bluebird manufacturing, what was kind of the bread and butter, I guess, or
Sure. So um we've all Bluebird's already always made a 150-pound clay mixer, and that clay mixer's always been loved because it mixes so well and consistent, and it's easy to remove the clay. You're not because the hopper dumps. So when that hopper dumps, the auger continues to turn and pushes the clay to the front of that um, the hopper. So it's easy to remove. So that's one thing that we're kind of known for. Our pug mills, our 440 pug mills. Everybody. It's funny to talk to people. You're in the Bailey booth at in Sika, and all the Bailey guys like, well, we have a 440. I got a 440. I got a 440, and all these professors and everything. So I think the 440 is definitely another thing that put us on the map. And then for the pottery wheels, the Soldner pottery wheels, um, it's like either or you don't know what Soldner is about, and our wheels, and what makes them so desirable and long lasting and that sort of thing. So I'd say, the pug mills and the mixers and the pottery wheels.
has Soldner always been
Uh,
part of Bluebird?
No,
well,
so go ahead, Becca.
well, sorry. Oh, I was gonna say, uh, well, no, continue. I'll follow.
Okay. So Paul Soldner is the inventor of the Soldner pottery wheels. And his philosophy was he wanted to create a wheel that wasn't using proprietary equipment. If you blew a belt or a bearing was starting to go, that you could go into a parts store and buy the parts and fix it there. We're not having to call us to order parts. So that was one thing that a lot of people really loved, that, and I think put them on the map, is besides the amazing foot control with great response and feel. So Paul started the business, and then I don't really know why he sold it or what led to the selling, but he had sold it to another guy, and his name escapes me at this point, but he sold to another guy, and then Dave Ball, who was the current owner until I owned it, had bought it from him, and he was operating it for 20 some years.
Okay. So but it wasn't under the Bluebird when you purchased Bluebird? So it was like a
Yeah, oh, yeah.
separate
So I guess
purchase?
I didn't connect the two. So when 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 Paul sold it, he sold it to Bluebird, and Bluebird was also manufacturing clay working machinery. So they basically continued to build the Soldner pottery wheel, but with the Bluebird equipment. So it's always, or it has
Hmm.
been since Paul's building, and that Soldner pottery wheels were made by Bluebird Manufacturing.
Okay, okay. And then they just kept but they kept the branding of Soldner because that name is kind of synonymous with the wheel itself. So,
Yep, absolutely.
if okay, gotcha.
And
So go ahead, Becca.
I'm gonna interject. Sorry, nobody can see me, so they don't know when I want to talk. So, so also it should be noted that Soldner, like Paul Soldner, lived in Aspen, Colorado for the majority of his like life. And he also made clay mixers, which I don't believe Bluebird did anything with, and because they're completely different. They're like a completely different mixer. Um, and I mean, a lot of people have heard us talk about Soldner on this podcast because that's actually the first wheel that I ever learned on. I learned on a Soldner kick wheel, and then I bought a Soldner, and then I have the P200 that I bought later. So it's, and I've had all the other wheels too, but those have been like the very specific ones. But yeah, Bluebird purchased them and then continued to continue to make them just like Jordan's doing essentially. And also I should mention that the Soldner people, he might not say this because he's a polite human being, but Soldner people are kind of like a cult. It's a cult. It's a cult.
You're talking about
And
the customers?
yeah, the customers. So if you
Okay.
have a Soldner, they're like, oh, it has to be this way, and you can't change it, and it has to look this way. And it's really, anyway, not jealous of Jordan's position right now.
Like you would
Uh,
never put a plastic splash pan on a Soldner pottery wheel. Is that like that kind of like, oh man, you like ruined it or.
I don't know. I don't know, but like, they're pretty picky. I will say that.
And that's kind of what I was getting at, is like, if you know, you know, and you know what you like and love. And
Hey everybody, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We're going to take a quick break and talk a little bit about L&L kilns. So, if you didn't know, you can go to the support section of the website and they have a bunch of information. There's a bunch of how-to videos, whether you're installing your kiln, you're doing maintenance on it, you're looking up like how to ventilate it, if you've got error codes with your controller. So even if you don't have a Genesis controller or you have a Bartlett controller on whatever kiln you have, they have the error codes on there and you can find all that info. And basic maintenance, all that stuff is on there. So even if you don't have an L&L, there's still a lot of useful information on there. They've been putting a lot of time and effort into making these videos very helpful. They've got instruction manuals and everything like that. So if you're interested, go to L&L Kilns at hotkilns.com and go to the support section. Thanks so much, and let's get back to the episode.
I think it's because sometimes that's what they've been told, or sometimes they have decades and decades of um, throwing with it, and they've, that's what they're accustomed to, and that's what they love, and that's what they know, and I totally get that. So it is it is a fun group. We love everybody, and just have to learn how to communicate with everybody, and make it work.
Yeah. So how many staff were there when you purchased it, and are a number of them like still involved and still part of the business and all that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. They've um Aaron is our one employee and our only employee. Um, um, I don't know. There's been a couple others that I've heard about, um, but at this point, um, Aaron was doing, I think, most of the work before, and now that we can split it between us, and we do a lot, we're a lot more efficient with our manufacturing. So, um, just to be profitable, I'm willing to work and kill myself to make it all work. So it's just it's just Aaron and I in that in our little building, but with building the process, we're sure are a lot more efficient than they used to be.
Okay. So with the purchase, like what, how does that happen? Like how does that go? Is it just like you're agreeing to terms and like we're buying the building and this is what you're gonna get, signing over here's what we manufacture, here's our customer base, or like what goes into something like that?
Yeah, it was a lot of time with. Well, I mean, let's so I told Aaron, I was like, "Hey, Aaron, I'll buy it," and he went away, and then
So
he
Aaron was the
came.
guy that was unloading the truck that you were talking
Yeah, so
about.
yep. So that was the guy that was all bummed out, and I said, "Well, I'll buy it." So he came over a couple days later, and he said, "I talked to Dave, and he wants to talk and see if you can negotiate something." I was like, "Okay, yeah, and with real estate being so silly and crazy, I didn't know how. I mean, I didn't think we could make a deal and make it happen. So we started negotiating and making it, and then it's this huge process of inventory and all the intellectual property and all that lawyer baloney.
I'm sure there's
So
back orders and things like that that are waiting to be fulfilled and that transition period and staying with communication, like all that.
yeah, all that. And the problem was he was a grumpy old man, not very happy to take phone calls and deal with the customers. So I'm looking at it as like, okay, and during this whole conversation, he's like, Jordan, I want you to make this company go. And I gave him my word that I would give it a good faith effort to make the company go. So from that point and my word, I said, well, I got to get serious about this and learn what the heck what is it? What is a pottery wheel? What is this? What does it take to make this stuff? Because at that point it was just you know just spouting off and saying, sure, I'll take it. So, and the negotiation was taking and dragging on too long. And I'm seeing the phones ring and orders uh, get missed and all this stuff. So I went over there one day and Dave's in his office and I hear him take a phone call and he's being just rude to the customer. And I'm like, I can't have this. If I got to make this company go, so as soon as he got off that phone, I picked it up and I forwarded his phones that I had no right to do to my cell phone. And we're like a month away from closing on this business. And I forwarded his phones to my phone
So
without
he's
asking.
just he's just thinking like, man, we're in a great spot. My phone is not ringing. I don't know what's going on, but it's great.
Exactly, exactly. So this went on for like 2.5 weeks where I set up QuickBooks. I'm taking orders and I'm like, I have to like sneak over to talk to Aaron. I'm like, Aaron, I don't know what these people want. Help me out. So I'm taking order. I'm like trying to talk to these people, take orders, and do all this stuff about back orders and all this stuff. And about 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks later, Dave calls the shop to talk to Aaron.
Yeah.
But we're getting closer to closing. And Dave's like, Jordan, you at the shop? And it
Ooh.
didn't occur. It didn't occur to me because I'm so used to answering the phone. Bluebird Clay, this is Jordan. How can I help you?
Uh-huh.
So at this point, Dave's like, "You at the shop, Jordan?" And I go, "No. What's up?" He goes, "Well, I called the shop phone," and I'm like, "Oh, uh, yeah. I forwarded the phones. Figured it might help you out, take some load off you." And he's like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks. See ya." So I mean, I almost had a heart attack, but it was an unreasonable thing to do, but in the long run, I'm glad I did it because um, I learned a lot. I kind of got thrown in, and uh, I mean, we made a ton of sales, in that those 3 weeks. So people were so used to being told everything's going to take forever, and I'm just like promising the world, trying to
Hmm.
like I can do it. So uh yeah, and that's kind of how we got the ball.
Wow. Baptized in fire there, it sounds like.
Yeah, sure enough.
Jeez. Okay, so so like closing's done. It's now yours. I'm guessing you negotiated with Aaron of, sticking around
Yep.
and helping make things work as you're getting your bearings.
Well, I had to. I mean, I couldn't build any of this stuff because I'd never even seen it.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, Aaron was he made it all happen, and he's a he's a he's a great guy, and couldn't have done it without him, that's for sure. So, yeah, we close, and the shop is just like completely not how I would want it, or can it wouldn't work because I got to move all my equipment in, and this place was packed. I mean, they were hoarders. They didn't throw away boxes. They were so cheap. They saved boxes because they might need to ship something out in these boxes. And I mean, there's offices everywhere, pallet racking everywhere, and so day one work, I get the keys and everything, go home. The next day I come in and Dave's sitting at his old desk. I'm like, hey Dave, what's going on? Oh, I just, sitting at the desk. I was like, well,
You
you
don't
need
work
something?
here anymore.
And he
Like,
continued to do it. He continued to do it for a while. So that was pretty interesting. And, just trying to negotiate, or may, I don't know.
well, yeah, because you don't want somebody watching over your shoulder when you're trying to do stuff in the shop and you're throwing stuff away and somebody's like, oh, you might need that or
Yeah, so that was tricky because basically he picked up his briefcase and like walked out. I was like, you don't want anything? It's like, nope, got everything I need. I was like, there's got to be sentimental stuff. So it was kind of like I try to respect, try not to throw away too much stuff, but I'm like, Dave, the dumpster's coming, and I got guys coming to fill it. So if you want it, got to get it. So yeah, and it was like 3 or 4 months of ripping everything out of the building. We rewired it completely, painted, um, yeah, new electrical panels, new lighting. So it was like super stressful because people are waiting on stuff, and I can't even start making stuff because I have to get out of my lease where my machine shop is now, and I have like this short window, and I already had to extend it um because the closing took so long. So uh yeah, it was a wild time of hurry up and wait and promise the world, and no idea how to no idea how to fulfill those promises.
so is it I'm guessing there was machinery there to make what you all had like quote unquote like promised to the customers that had purchased, but you're trying to get your machinery in there to like
Yeah,
remanufacture the same products.
it was just antiquated. So to bend, like on our P wheel, it's that round tubing, and he was bending it by hand. So like an old school Greenlee conduit bender that was just a huge strenuous effort to bend it. His hands are bleeding and he's sweating, and he's like to bend like four of these in a day. So
You're talking about
like the
the
manufacturing, like the
the prof
antiquated tooling
the
to
professional
create.
wheel. I'm looking at it on the website, the professional size pottery wheel with the kind of like metal circle around the wheel part.
Yep. So like the P wheels, the P250, the P400, or any of those. Yeah. So
Yeah.
they were manually bending all that stuff, and I'm looking at it like, I mean, this isn't the 1920s anymore. I mean, we have tools for this, and I have like a hydraulic bender
Mhm.
and all these tools, and I'm like, we can do all of them in an afternoon. Like if we're doing a batch of 20 wheels, we can make those 80 bends for that one piece in an afternoon, and not sweat. So much of the stuff, it just killed me to see how they were doing. I had CNC plasma tables that could cut an entire sheet of metal where it would take Aaron days to cut it all out by hand.
Right.
So for me, it was just like I would rather spend the time to get the shop set up to do it in a modern fashion instead
Right.
of you know not having any tooling to
And it takes
manufacture.
a lot of upfront machinery and investment to be able to modernize it. Whereas I would suspect the margins are kind of tight, and that's why, doing it by hand for so long, and it's expensive machinery, right?
Yeah, and when you're ready to retire, it's hard and and he's not still building the business. The business had been dying for years and years. So I understand his point. He doesn't want to invest all his earnings back into the business because he's ready to walk away. So, yeah, absolutely. And what worked perfect for the merger or the combination of his business and my business is that I had been purchasing all these pieces of equipment over the last 4 or 5 years. So it was just a perfect fit that I could come in, not have to have a huge capital investment um, to buy all this equipment. And really, if I didn't have, I mean, I just got so lucky. I just feel so blessed to have purchased almost the exact equipment that I needed to get in there and start building stuff. So really, I mean, it's
Sound like new problems to solve for you that you're like, oh well, I haven't used my machine in this way, or like for this specific type of you know metal working that I'm gonna like put together in this fashion.
yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of stuff that was done because um that's what they had. That's the materials they had. I don't like angle iron. It just reminds me like of farm equipment. And there was angle iron and C channel on all of our equipment. And um, like my goal was to like let's eliminate C channel and angle iron to make it a refined, more elegant piece of equipment than just like angle iron and C channel. So
Hmm.
that was my goals is refinement, like um the low hanging fruit. Okay, we won't change a lot of big dimensions, but we'll use different material. We'll use a different style of putting these things together. So like instantly it was start modeling all this equipment and creating the files to cut the pieces on the computer because it was like sketches and hand drawn notes and all this just gibberish in files to try to make sense of and create the equipment. So basically, I looked at it and just started creating all the equipment kind of how it was, but in CAD software and modeled it. And then from there we could start manufacturing. I luckily he had some inventory that we built in the fashion that they had been building, and that was like good for me to get familiarized with all the equipment and kind of get up to speed and figure out what I could change and what I needed to change. So
Hmm. Is that
going
just a
from
disassembling a piece of equipment and then measuring everything and putting it into CAD at certain dimensions so that you can kind of plug those dimensions into a cutter and just kind of recreate with modern technology?
yeah, kind of a lot of reverse engineering where you take it apart and measure and stuff and a lot of that and a lot of me asking questions of like why do we do it like this, and the answer I would get is well that's how we do it, or that's how I've always done it. And that's like face palm
Hmm.
just drove me nuts. It got to the point where I said, Aaron, if there's not a logical reason we do something, just say no idea, but don't tell me that's how we've always done it because that just drives me nuts.
Hmm.
So, and I think that just leaves a lot of room for improvement and progress. So,
Yeah, I mean, you got
that's
to go to product development from the ground up at that point. And you've never, I mean, not having pottery experience, I don't know how much having pottery experience makes a difference, but when you're making machines, I would suspect, you have enough experience to be like, okay, here's the parts that I need, and here's what. this machine is doing, and then you kind of break it down that way.
Yep, absolutely. And I think if I what's important to me and I realize is I listen to the people using it. I don't act like I'm the one building it. That's not how it's supposed to be used. If I had that mentality, I think me not having clay experience would be detrimental. But my willingness to listen and apply what people are telling me is what I think is a huge advantage to our situation where we can make changes on the fly. We can, if there's something that needs to be changed, it's we can implement that immediately into manufacturing. So um, I think that's really important to note is just that I have to be able to change on the fly and listen to potters. And I think that's why it's been working so well.
How are you finding
Has
those people?
what? No, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Ha has like, um, first of all, I think it's really cool that you actually don't have any pottery background, and I know that maybe some people would disagree with me, but I think it brings a fresh perspective, which I appreciate. But has oh, now I lost my whole question. I lost my whole question. But okay, let's see.
We're talking
Has
about no background and no experience and my view of listening to customers and applying that.
yeah, has oh, like learning more about like pottery and stuff, has it helped you like design more things? Is it something that you're enjoying, like being kind of like immersed in the pottery community without ever like just getting thrown in the water, in the water essentially? Like, how do you
Yeah.
feel about that?
Oh, I have had so many people tell me, Jordan, I never in a million years would have guessed you be involved in the pottery world, the ceramics industry. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I think um, I'm quite a bit different than the standard um, pottery student, or but I, I I really do love it. I think that I have a lot to learn, and it does help the more I know. So I've been plugging in with CSU ceramics department, and they've been great, and just getting involved and talking to as many people as I can, and just listening.
So how, as you're doing this development and getting immersed, like who are you getting connected with? Is it going to like old work orders of customers that have bought over the years? Like, how do you know who's kind of pushing those products to the limit and are people that you want to seek out for feedback and insights of, okay, if I'm developing this product from, version 2 or version 3, how do I know how to improve the clay mixer, for instance, or the pug mill?
Sure. And well, initially it was like I'll talk to anybody, and I mean, I'll talk to anybody, listen to anybody. Like at Ensika. Ensika was we closed February 15th of 23, and Ensika was March like 15th. So I'd only owned the company for a month, and I was at Ensika. So luckily, Ben Clark at Queen
Ben
City
Clark
Clay.
at Queen City Clay. Yep.
Yeah, he was absolutely so kind and generous to us. He allowed us to take up space in their booth. He invited us in, allowed us to be there, and that was kind of like my introduction to the community. So from being at Queen City and meeting all those people, it was kind of like an instant. Now, okay, now I know people that I can start talking to and having fun with and learning from. So that was my initial, you know, making friends and getting phone numbers and that kind of thing. And then standing at his booth, this gal comes up to me. Well, this gal's sitting there and she's pointing at our Soldner wheel, and she's just like giving me like she's like shaking her head, and you can tell she's not happy about it. And I'm like, what? Really? So me just trying to kill her with kindness, I walked up. I said, "Good afternoon. I'm Jordan. How can I help you?" And she's like, uh, "Danny hates this pottery wheel." And I go, "Danny who?" And she's like, "Danny Messinger." And I go, "I don't know who he is, and I don't know why he would hate our pottery wheel. He throws big stuff, and if you throw big, you throw on a Soldner. So I mean, if you know, you know, right, Becca?
Do.
Exactly, right. So I was like, well, I got to go find Danny and see what's going on. So I went over to his booth and he had like a line 30 minutes long, people wanting to talk to him and get his autograph or whatever. So I waited in line and I got up to Danny. I was like, "Hi, Danny. I'm Jordan of Bluebird, and I heard you're having a hard time with your pottery wheels. How can I help?" And he goes, "Oh, man, I am so sick of these wheels." And I go, "Well, what's going on?" He's like, "They don't know which direction to go. It's like you you start you put your pedal down and it turns one way one time and the other way the other time, and they just messed up." And I go, "What?" And I'm thinking like, there's no way that could be our wheel. I mean, there's no way.
You didn't say I'm from Bluebird though. I don't think
Yes,
we're
yeah. I just said I'm Jordan Bluebird, just
okay.
casual. And so he goes on and on and on, and I go, "Well, what model?" He's like, "I don't know. It's like the Shimpo Whisper VL something." And I go, "Oh, misunderstanding. It's not my wheel." And he's like, "You waited in line 30 minutes to talk to me and figure out what's going on?" I go, "Yeah." He's like, "The Shimpo people aren't in line to talk to me." And I go, "Well, if you're ready for the best wheel, give me a call." And he's like, "Yeah, I would love to." And we had two wheels up in the one wheel or two wheels in the making space that year. And he's like, I gotta try your wheel." So that next morning before the making space opened, he came up and threw on our wheel and threw like a 25 pound. He threw 25 pounds on. Actually, he threw half a bag on and then added the other half of the bag on the wheel and then threw this like 2.5 foot diameter bowl in 3 minutes. And he says, "I gotta have one of these. I love it."
Wow.
And that was the start of the relationship with Danny and I and Bluebird. So
Hey, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We're going to take a quick break and talk a little bit about our friends over at Smith Sharp. They are the producers of Advancer kiln shelves. If you're not familiar, the Advancer kiln shelves are very thin kiln shelves. The standard ones are 8 millimeters thin. The Ultras, which are the brand new product they have out, are 4 millimeters thin, which is crazy to imagine. Like, a standard shelf is what, 3/4 of an inch to an inch on average. So, if you're interested in some thinner kiln shelves, they also have, a great process for cleaning up. They absorb less than 1% porosity on the surface of them. So any glaze that's on there, it can just get scraped off super easily. Clean up as a breeze. Also, with them being so thin, you're going to be able to fit more work in your kiln. So if you want to check out all the products that they have over at on the Advancer site, you can check that out at kilnshelf.com. I love them. Becca loves them. And we hope you do too. So thanks so much. And we'll get back to the episode.
um, you never know how you're going to meet somebody or make a connection. And I would have never gone and talked to him if that lady hadn't been, giving us that look. So I don't know. It's just wild. And I think things happen for a reason and cause us to do things for a reason. So definitely feel blessed and lucky to be in these positions.
I think
Wow.
that you were talking about your background, which now makes a lot of sense about the diesel heater, how you're like, you should get a diesel heater. Um, I think that you and Danny should do like a reality TV show and we'll just like stick you out in the middle of the woods with a bunch of tools and see what comes of it because you guys are both Renaissance men. Like, you know everything.
Well, if you're willing to keep learning and always hanging out with people smarter than you can pick up so much stuff. And
Yeah.
I think that's what I try to teach my kiddos is that we're always learning, we're always it doesn't matter. We can learn from everybody, and that's really important to me. And Danny um, has been a great learning experience. So much wisdom from him, and direction. It's been a lot of fun.
Uh, I Well, one of the biggest reasons that I think that I wanted you on the podcast, uh, started at ClayCon West and then moved. It just got my opinion got stronger as I like hung out with you for that day about. Could you talk a little bit about the cost that is involved with like making things out of metal? Because I like the first example that we had was we were like, do you know what oh
Oh,
gosh, now
banding.
I
You're talking about
a
a
banding
banding.
wheel is.
Right.
Yeah, we were like, do you know what a banding wheel is? And he's like, I have no idea. And then we brought him one of Shimpo's banding wheels, and he's like, I could never make this for the same cost that they do. And then just talking about like your, for instance, the clay mixer and how much, like you said to me, like one piece of the metal of the like auger of that mixer is it's
1,100
expensive.
for one sheet of stainless. Yeah, stainless plate.
Yeah. Can you talk about like, because I think that when people see stuff like yours that is primarily made out of metal, like I'm shipping my old Soldner right now and it's 150 pounds. It is really heavy and it's tiny. And could you talk about like why everything is so expensive comparatively to like say another wheel that might be made out of plastic? And I know that you also have like a goal of being able to hose it down. Can you talk about that too?
Sure, absolutely. So one thing about a Soldner wheel is it's a forever wheel. Um, it is a wheel that never needs to be thrown away. It can be repaired repaired and fixed. And that's kind of with it goes parallel to my or in alignment with my mentality is that I don't want to make the cheapest products. I want to make the the best products within reason, use the best components, use the components that I would want um, on my personal equipment. So I think of it as like, of course, this isn't going to the moon. It's not mission critical, but I think of the potter that's preparing for a big show, and they're producing stuff, and at that point it becomes mission critical. So as far as the costs of equipment go, um, it's like it goes all the way down to a simple component like a switch. Um, if how how many times have we replaced Brent switches in those wheels? How many times have we replaced the silly fuse in the back? How many times have we, you have to put the Brent growl, and you have to put a wheel head and a bearing cartridge. It's a one assembly. And for me, that's not acceptable. So a switch, I could buy a switch that is inexpensive. It's rated for like 10,000 cycles. But what pops in my head is that Potter getting ready for a great big show, and this has to work no matter what. So I buy a $2 million or 2 million cycle switch, or a 10 million cycle switch, or a 25 million cycle switch, whatever we're talking about in type of switch. So I think when we start buying the best components, that's an ad. And then our wheel heads are cast in a foundry here in Fort Collins, where if we're looking at a wheel head that is not solid, it's like a candy shell, and then ribs and stuff in it, where all the only other company that makes a solid wheel head is Scott. So what happens is that we're not using China labor, we're not having things cast in Vietnam, we're not doing that stuff on the scale of hundreds of thousands or millions. Each component cost is significantly more. So it just adds up, and in the end, where a Brent wheel costs a manufacturer $400 total, I could have more than $400 in a motor and a speed control because my speed control is waterproof, where you can squirt it down with a hose. It doesn't have a fuse that blows. It's industrial rated. All of those things lead up to the point where our wheel is at the high end of other wheels. And the other part of that is, our margins are smaller. So I think with the best components and still trying to be competitive in the market, that leads to kind of where we're at.
So is the how do you know where that line is of what's, what in actual, like, you're kind of going for that, I'm gonna say like a small percentage that's like at the, like, wanting that Danny Meisinger level of, like, they want a wheel that's 40 years versus, like, you're not hitting those entry level folks that are just coming into pottery, but you're trying to market to the people that are like that, I'm gonna say like 10% or whatever group that are kind of your sweet spot.
They're in it
Yep.
for life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a first pottery wheel purchase. It's somebody that's bought a lesser quality or lesser expensive wheel, and now they know that they are a lifer, so it is time to buy the best of the best, and that's where we end up. The marketing has been non-existent for the last couple decades, so we're really trying to gain market share with still being competitive and just making a lot more people aware. We're trying to get our wheels into studios and schools and just get people learning and knowing our wheel.
Hmm. Did because the wheel, there's also a wheel that looks different too. Like there's some changes that were made to some, like, I think I did see a Bluebird wheel in the, maybe I don't know if it was Brandon Bluebird, but it was in Queen City Clay and it had the green and the black. Was that like one of
Yep.
the first models of that style, or is that just like a reskinning of one of the Soldners?
Yep, that's the S wheel or the studio wheel. That main framework and the style is the way it's always been. Um, a big that when Dave owned it, that they were losing money on every one of those that they sold. And at the end, just because prices had got so crazy. And that was really, I mean, that wasn't an option for me. So that's kind of what started us down the road of, okay, how do we give people the response, the torque, and like how can I do it with modern technology? And so we put a three-phase motor on there, and we use that variable frequency drive that is on there, which is that's what brings the power in and turns it into three-phase because all of our motors are three-phase motors. And yeah, that was like the first big change, and
Are
that
other
was hard.
common motors three phases or no? Like a Brent or a Shimpo, are those single phase or
No,
three phase?
they're DC motors. So DC power is kind of like what's in your car, and so it's direct current is like the type of power your car makes or uses. And then AC or alternating current is like what your house uses. So all Brents, Scuts, those are taking house power and turning it into DC power, direct current. And um, ours is taking house power and turning it into like industrial three-phase power. So we're unique that no one I, I don't know what the VL Whisper is doing as far as their power, what that motor is, but um
But you could still plug it
everybody
into a typical outlet. So there's
yep.
some technology in there to be able to do that, but the bones of it are different than. the competitors.
Yep, the drivetrain. Yeah, the drivetrain, the type of motor, and that stuff. Everybody else has brushes in there, and that's typically what makes most of the noise is the brushes in the motor. Um, if a wheel was to turn one direction for a long time, when it goes the opposite direction, it makes a squeal. So yeah, it's a totally different approach to the pottery wheel, and it was really difficult to get that ball rolling, just to be accepted, I guess.
Hmm. Because all that stuff is covered up, so you don't really know until you I mean, you probably know the responsiveness and the stopping ability and like the sound, but having the value in the closed area that you can't even see and like making sure that value is understood and communicated to the customers is a
Yep.
challenge.
Yep, absolutely. And just and trusting and knowing, I think a lot of people want um to know that or have seen it, and creating something totally different is, that lack of history is challenging to get um people to agree to that initially. Now our it's kind of known, there's enough people know about it or seen it used that okay, it is a good thing. And originally we only had our standard pedal, which was a it's like a it's the same pedal for a TIG welder is what I chose, because I've been using that pedal for 15 years every day in the shop, and that pedal works every day and it has to be perfectly consistent. Where I'd heard stories about the Brent pedal and that silly little sliding potentiometer that's I would have a dead spot in it or didn't start the same every time. So
Or it's a ghost wheel. Ugh.
right. So I knew I could trust that pedal. So I figured out, okay, how to make that pedal work and um start, making that work. But I didn't have a Soldner pedal option. So it took me maybe 6 or 7 months to develop how do I use a Soldner platform, put the correct sensor in the Soldner, which had never had a sensor, and now I can control the brushless the motor with that a Soldner pedal. So that has been a big help. I think the take on the Soldner brushless upgrade is like 95%. So we're selling a small percentage with that black standard pedal that we only had not offered initially.
And that's the
Can
black
you
pedal with the gold, and it's got like the big silver thing on the side of it. That's the
No,
pedal we're talking about.
that's the Soldner pedal. The standard pedal is just like a black where it's got like grip tape on the
it's
um
similar to the speedball pedal, but it's not the same as a speedball pedal. So it just looks like a black box, essentially.
Hmm. Okay.
Can you let's say somebody had a Brent or a Shimpo, could they buy the pedal from you and would it work similarly in their wheels?
Absolutely. Yep. So that is definitely on the action item list of making a kit that will make an easy adapt. We easily adapt our Soldner pedal, and that would be the DC pedal, to control their Brent. Basically, we throw their pedal away, we throw their controller away, and our pedal connects directly to the motor. So that's one option. That would be the premium option. We're going to have a little bit lesser expensive option where it would use the brushless pedal and use the same type of technology that is in a Brent now, but with good sensors and everything. And then that would be another option. So we're going to have two options to control any other wheel and have it with the best components and a lifelong pedal. If the chords, easy chord replacement, that whole bit. So absolutely, that is a target of ours.
So, Becca, I want to give you a chance here. If you had if you had some, I think taking most of it, but did you have something you wanted to ask?
No, I mean, um, I, I, no, I guess how I want to know about the mixers because I think the wheels are cool and but we kind of like talked about the mixers and the pug mills and um a lot of people, you know, go for a specific type of pug mill because they it's always in the media. We won't name names, but it rhymes with Ugger and and er just
Schmeener Schmugger.
Schmeeder Schmugger. And I was like, well, does yours, like naively, I was like, well, does yours can't push out the same amount of clay as that one does? And you were like, yeah, it sure can. And yeah, can you just talk a little bit about that and about like the pug mills slash mixers? Because, it's I feel like there's not very many companies that sell a good pug mill that actually seals.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. So we have our small studio pug mill, we have our mid-sized pug mill, which would be the power size or power star, and then we have our great big pug mill being the 3000. And the 440 is an excellent seller of ours. It is a cast aluminum barrel pug, and we have hundreds or thousands of those, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of those from the 80s still running. So it's just a little workhorse and it's a great pug. Um, what it does great is it pugs clay great. It reclaims clay great. It's consistent, it's de-aired, it's it's beautiful clay. And that goes for all of them. And some of those refinements that needed to be made, as far as like the clay presses and how they seal and the bearings and all that, we've made all the small changes that we can, and we're really excited to release the next generation of all our pug mills. And um, I think the other brands are they're like a Swiss Army knife, where like a Swiss Army knife, it's got like a screwdriver and a corkscrew and all that crap on it. But is the corkscrew really that great? No, it's like awkward to use, and the handle to use it as a knife is too big. So what I found is that the other pug mills are like a Swiss Army knife, where they're not really good at pugging, they're not really good at mixing. It's just like one piece of equipment that kind of does everything okay, and it's good because we only need one piece of equipment. So our goal is that we're not the Swiss Army knife. We are the best at doing, we're the best mixer, we're the best pug mill, and there's no, we're not going to be happy with a mediocre process on one or the other. So, yeah, we're definitely um, gunning for the top spot, and with everything that we're in development, I think we're going to be back on top again.
Because I would suspect with pug mills, that's also a purchase that is very pricey, and you hope that that's a lifetime purchase. It's not something you're going to have issues with because you pay so much money for it,
Yep.
and it's a sophisticated piece of machinery.
Yeah, and usually it's high throughput classrooms, studios, guilds where there's a lot of people using it. So I think what sets us apart is our customer service. I'll answer the phone and talk to you, and we're here to help. So uh, I lost my train of thought.
You're here
What
to
was
help.
Yeah, I'm here to help, and I'm here to I'm hungry. I'm hungry to make the best products and keep developing and moving forward and just
So the 440 I'm seeing on here, it's at like 400 pounds per hour. That's the de-airing.
yeah.
Why would somebody get a non-de-airing pug mill?
I found that the people that
Besides the price difference. I mean,
sure. The non-deairing, a lot of people still feel that it compacts the clay well enough that during throwing, that they don't necessarily have air pockets. I think the clay body you're working with could have something to do with it, but Becca, you'll have to chime in here if you worked with
Yeah.
a non-deairing quite a bit.
I haven't worked as much with a non-deering, but I do have a friend that has one. And it's a giant one. And Josh has one. Josh
mhm.
Heim.
Okay.
And he essentially uses it for mixing because and he doesn't have an issue. He just kind of like he has a big trash can and he throws it all in there and trash can of clay and throws it all in there and then he just mixes it up and lets it sit for a minute and then it's usually fine. I would say that de-airing is more for the production, like somebody who doesn't care as much. Maybe an older style of potter,
Doesn't care as
old school
much?
style,
You
like
mean?
about air bubbles in the clay.
Oh, okay.
Um, I would say that if you're gonna go for like if you, a new potter would want to go for de-airing if you're gonna get a pug mill. Um, but also at the same time, if you're just getting like a de-airing pug mill, like one that's not de-airing, I think you might as well just get a clay mixer. You know, just it's almost just as good just to get a mixer. Just because then you can mix whatever you need, you know, like and like pack it down. And if you're gonna wedge it anyway, a lot of people like if you're an avid wedger, you don't need a de-airing pug mill. Like,
Because they're gonna wedge it out of the log anyways.
yeah, if you're gonna, yeah, that's like taxing somebody twice. Like,
I'm like, why would you
it,
do that? But I mean,
like,
you know,
yeah, it is.
I
It's
guess if you
dumb. Like, if somebody's like, oh, I have a pug mill and it takes all the air out, but I'm still gonna wedge this, there's no point. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's just all personal preference. Typically, de-airing takes a little less time or a little more time to get the clay out of the actual auger than it does to for a non-de-airing. But
Not in
I would
ours, though.
assume
There's no dwell time.
there's you're
There's
like
no
not
dwell time. So that's another thing. All the other pugs throughput is so slow because it doesn't de-air while it's pugging.
but yours
So
does.
is that one of those
yes,
things where you have to have the arm down and have like some semblance of a seal, but you're saying like once it's in a certain spot of the pug mill, it
Hmm.
can de-air properly without having like a seal.
no, like if you're mixing, you have to you're mixing and de-airing. So we have to wait for the mixing time, and then it's de-airing. Then it can start pugging.
Yeah, but
So our
Shimpo has a long body pugger that de-airs.
sure, I guess I wasn't talking about them. I was talking.
The rhymes with.
Uh-huh.
Mugger
So is it's
sweater.
because it has to fill up enough that you know whatever where you're putting it in at like the de-airing happens
Yeah, because
down the
it
chain.
has to be, it has to seal and it has to be a somewhere for it to draw that air out of.
Hmm.
So the way their pug is designed is that there is no narrower cavity to seal when it starts pugging. So since it's so short, they have to de-air the entire batch. Um, so
It would
there's
almost can you turn off? Well, I guess you wouldn't have to, but I feel like it would almost be faster to throw your slop through the pugger and have like a crappy log come out and then do it again than to mix it with a with an alternative type of pugger. You know, like because you have to mix, then you have to seal, and then you have to extrude. Um,
Yeah, and
and
that's like you said, a clay mixer, like our little cute clay mixer. I mean, game on if you want to talk about fast reclaiming and not screwing around with trying to put it in a silly little pug mill.
yeah, can
And
you
you got
tell
the
the
50
story?
pound batch, you got the 150-pound batch clay
Yeah, and
mixers.
that's really conservative. That's very conservative. So we're making big changes right now with the mixers as well. So that small mixer is about 100-pound batch size. And what's so cool about clay mixers and they're really not oh it's funny how many people walk up and ask about our mixers and say, is this a pug mill? And no, it's not a pug mill, it's a mixer. And it's not a very known thing because it's a big purchase again. So you have to buy a mixer and it, like you said, Becca, if you're gonna wedge it, um,
Yeah,
you
if you're
don't
gonna wedge it, yeah,
you
you
don't need.
don't really need it.
But most of the people that are buying mixers are great big studios or universities or Ford Clay has Ford Motor Company. Their clay division uses our mixers and pug mills, so that's pretty cool. Um, so those we find that most of our clay mixers go to large studios that have a very high throughput and don't have time to reclaim in small pug mills.
I
So
think that, oh, go on.
no, go ahead.
I think that if I was to have another studio again, like a community studio, 10 out of 10 would buy a mixer instead of a pugger. Because your studio, the studio members can wedge their own clay, you know? Like I can wedge my own clay, but having that much reclaim is, it's like honestly, like as I look back, no brainer. Like no brainer. But I spent so many hours at my pug mill just trying to like, first of all, make it work, and then second of all, like get a good consistency that if I'd had a mixer, oh my God, it would have been so much better.
Yep.
You're saying because it's kind of a set it forget it, and it's a big enough chunk that you don't have to babysit it as much as
Yeah,
like a pug mill because the batch is not really a huge amount. It's maybe like a bag of clay generally.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah,
the mixer's so great because we're not having to dry in slabs. You know, you don't have to spend the time. You don't have to use that room in your studio to dry a bunch of slabs
yeah,
to start reclaiming that whole process. So it's nice where it's immediate. You don't have to let it build up. Our mixers are easy to clean out, easy to get the clay out. We're not having to bend over in a tub to remove all that clay. The other thing about our clay mixers is they have great big paddles and they're basically wedging the clay inside the mixer. And comparing our mixers to other mixers and is is that we have a that wedging motion inside of our mixers where the other guys don't. They just have like a round bar going through the clay, and that's why our mixers are always going to be a more consistent mix is because we're moving the clay, we're compacting the clay inside that mixing drum. Um, we don't have to worry about concrete contaminations in that mixer and um, or that backbreaking work of digging it out.
Can
yeah.
that actual thing that's spinning, can that be is that taken out when you're emptying it, or is it just a matter of just turning it a little bit so you can like get the clay
So
out?
when you rotate the bucket down, the auger would continue to spin, so it pushes all the majority of the clay to the lid.
Okay.
So it kind of unloads itself, and then when you open the door, a big chunk of that batch is at the front of the auger. So you can grab that and scoop that out. And then like a putty knife, and you can just, it's all stainless steel. So you just grab it and kind of work it down. And you're not picking it, more like just dragging it towards the front. So that's the reason. I've never unloaded the other mixers, and I don't want to think about unloading the other mixer. Sounds like a lot of.
I'm just thinking about cleaning it too, but but I would suspect with the amount of metal and everything that most people would probably spray it down, let it dry, and
Yeah,
then
like
spray it
hose
down
it
kind of thing.
down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. When we do tests, um we just scrape it all out, and I pressure wash it. I get the pressure wash, and the bucket's still bent, and it's done. So, uh, yeah, that's. I mean, you can put it away and have it look brand new every single time. I understand that doesn't happen very often, but that's how I would
Right.
want it. And that's kind of what we're designing them for, is to hose them out. And if you wanted, you could have our mixer look brand new for decades. You know, the inside will get polished and everything, and there might be a scratch here and there, but it doesn't have to look like it's, you know, is after day one, it's a muddy mess. You just hose them off and good to go.
Hola. So just so you guys know, we are splitting this up into two parts for this episode. We've been doing that with our longer recordings, especially the interviews, just because it, like I said, it gives us a little bit of a break, like so Ryan can go on his vacation, and it helps. Yeah, who doesn't love a part two? So that's what we're gonna do. So come back next week. Okay, bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to another episode of Wheel Talk. This podcast is made possible through the contributions of all of our listeners who always ask us great questions, leave us reviews, and contact with us through social media. Thanks to all the fellow makers as well who take time to be interviewed and share about their lives and businesses.
And thank you to Ashley from Boldover Ceramics and Lindy from Lindy Garner Ceramics for their assistance on the Whale Talk Podcast Instagram. You are invaluable. Thank you to everybody.